Welcome, foolish mortals, back to the villain's lair. Today I'm going to cover a more obscure Disney villain in honor of the season. Because it is fall, I'm going to spend the next several weeks leading up to, and maybe just a hair past Halloween, covering some of the spookiest Disney villains. And these may be well-known villains, or they may be more obscure villains like today's. Today I'm going to cover Abigail Gregory. What? Who? We were expecting Maleficent. No, Abigail Gregory. Now, you probably haven't heard of her unless you watched ABC on Sundays in 1997, because that is when the movie Tower of Terror came out. When you first meet Abigail, she's presented to you as this cute, feisty, kind of spunky, but really, really sweet, gentle little old lady who just wants the world to know what really happened on Halloween night when the Tower of Terror was struck by lightning and 5 people disappeared. Aw, isn't she sweet? Well, not so much. It turns out Abigail is responsible for the entire thing. Abigail is the sister, the older sister of Sally Shine, who is a child star kind of based on Shirley Temple, and even her look is super reminiscent of Shirley Temple. And so you see her in the show. The premise is that she was the largest child star in American history in 1939, which is when the big disaster happened. And as Sally Shine's older sister, Abigail never got the same amount of attention as her talented, beautiful sister. She felt not even resented, but just kind of completely ignored. And she very much had kind of this ugly duckling complex, basically. And as a result, she did, as we all do, resorted to black magic and cursed her sister to an eternity in the underworld. I feel like there's some steps between like having a conversation with your parents about this and jumping right to dark sorcery, but not for our buddy Abby. She basically attempted to banish her sister to the underworld, but because she only had an identifier, that is something owned by 2 of the people in the elevator that was struck, the spell was dispersed among the 5 victims, and so rather than them being condemned to hell, they were just kind of put in an eternal limbo. Not a whole lot better. And then part of this curse is that they are destined to then kind of re-experience the tragedy of that Halloween night over and over and over every single Halloween night until the curse is finally broken. It's kind of a rough deal. Rough for everyone, including Abigail, who, after the accident where her sister disappeared, her parents quickly noticed her obsession and indeed hatred and venom for her sister. That's how I feel about it too, Oliver. And so they ended up having to kind of institutionalize her. She is sent to a kind of a mental health facility. And I guess, I don't know why the parents wouldn't notice this obsession while her sister was alive, unless they were so wrapped up in their youngest daughter's career and her success that they didn't realize something was wrong with their oldest daughter until she was far from mournful at her sister's funeral. She would deface pictures of her sister. She would decapitate dolls in her sister's doll franchise. She hated her sister, and this obsession led her to be institutionalized for almost her entire life. She is released shortly before the movie begins, and she immediately then contacts Buzzy, who is a journalist, in order to supposedly get the story out of what actually happened that night in the Hollywood Tower Hotel. However, her real motivation is to simply complete the curse that she started that night in order to kind of finally condemn her sister all the way to hell deliberately. To do this, she needs an identifying item for the other 3 victims that were kind of unintentionally caught up in her curse. Nice girl. Well, basically then she and the others comb the hotel, and she has fooled Buzzy and the others into thinking that this will complete a counter curse. In other words, to repair the curse that she claims Miss Partridge, Sally Shine's nanny, cast on Sally. The truth is, of course, that this would only complete the initial curse and condemn all 5 victims to an eternity in the underworld rather than just Sally. So basically, she's kind of Disney's first big switcheroo as far as villains are concerned. And that's part of why I found her so interesting, even though I was so young when this movie came out. Because up until this point, Disney movies, you can pretty much point out the bad guy right from the beginning. You've got Maleficent, obviously bad. You've got Ursula, obviously bad. I mean, she's purple. It's never good. So this is the first Disney villain that you think, oh, look at the cute little old lady. Oh, isn't it nice that she wants to help those poor sad ghosties? And then bam, no. She's not only bad, but she's crazy bad. Like, she's sick. And she doesn't care whose soul is damned for eternity for her to feel, I don't know, not even just justified. I guess it's more like vengeance, because she doesn't really gain anything from cursing her sister. She just simply stops her sister from gaining everything. So there's not even greed involved here, because she doesn't get anything from it. It's literally just crazy envy, obsessive envy. In the end, she, of course, finds out that her sister, who she is trying to banish to the underworld, is the person who loves her most in the entire world. And that the party that her sister was going up to attend on Halloween night in 1939 was actually Abigail's birthday party. So the whole big party that everybody was headed to, that the singer was going to entertain at, and the bellhop was helping everybody get up to, was all just to celebrate Abigail, who enacted the curse because she felt unnoticed and unappreciated. So it turns out everybody had been paying attention the whole time. And it's funny, I noticed that with a lot of people. They think that nobody cares about them simply because they're not paying attention to the people who do. And so in the end, Sally and Abigail reunite, and Abigail is redeemed. They do break the curse, and the spirits are allowed to move on to heaven rather than that other place that Abigail was going to send them to. And so everybody is kind of rescued at the end. Abigail was motivated by envy, obviously. I mean, the jealousy of living in the shadow of the greatest child star of all time. But a lot of people don't point out the fact that she also was motivated by vanity and entitlement. She felt that, well, if her sister has all of this stuff and fame and glory and love, why shouldn't she? She's just as good as her sister. The truth of the matter is, sometimes you're just not as good at some stuff as other people are at that stuff. And it is very vain of you to think that you deserve to have everything given to you that the other person worked for. So this sense of entitlement and vanity is part of what sparked her envy. Her greatest reasoning that she gives for committing this act against her sister is, and I quote, "Nobody cared that Sally Shine had a sister." Well, why should they? If you want people to care about you, give them a reason. Don't just fade into the background and snipe other people. I've always had a really hard time with people who, if they don't get a promotion at work, they make it their mission to tear down the coworker who did get that promotion. And so they will go to any lengths to tear down that person rather than work harder and prove that they were truly the one worthy of that promotion. Abigail is, in fact, a childish caricature of this same behavior, largely because she was a child at the time when the curse took place, but then she was institutionalized her whole life. So as an old lady, she still kind of has the maturity and the mentality of a child because she's never been any more exposed to the world than she was when she was 10 years old. And so it's a very immature behavior that she shows, but at the same time, it's the same thing that adults tend to do in the workplace all the time. And so this feeling that, oh, I want that and they have that. So rather than work hard to prove that I'm worthy of the thing that I want, I'm just going to tear down the person who has it. And that's vanity and entitlement added to envy. It's not just envy. And I think a lot of people kind of blame that on envy when really there is definitely a huge quantity of vanity and entitlement kind of wrapped into that as well. You aren't just jealous of what the other person has, you think you deserve it better than they do because, well, just because you really want it, not because you actually have a reason or because you earned it, but because you want it and therefore you should have it just because they have it. It's not how things work, and it's not even right. But that is what motivated Abigail, because she was a child, and she had a child's maturity and mentality. And again, even as an adult, she never matured beyond that because she was so obsessed with what she thought was a wrong committed against her as a child. And then, of course, she finds out ultimately that the assumptions, the very ungenerous assumptions that she had made about everyone else, were completely untrue. It was literally all in her head, and she condemned people to death. She killed people for this. And so it's really sad, and she's a fascinating villain. It's kind of sad that you really don't hear about her very much. I mean, you're not going to see her at Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween. The name Abigail Gregory does not get as much attention as Maleficent or the Evil Queen, and it doesn't sound as scary because it's deliberately a very common sounding normal name. And that's part of what's spooky about her, is she seems like a normal, feisty old lady. She seems normal and sweet, with a normal, sweet name. You don't look at her and go, oh, that's the villain. Nope. You think she's nice. Until about halfway through the movie when her little treasure trove of vandalized, decapitated dolls is found. And so I love that she's kind of an early version of Hans, in that you think you're getting one thing. You think that Miss Partridge, Sally Shine's nanny, is the bad guy for a large portion of the movie, only to find out that it was Abigail, and she was kind of diverting the blame over at the very stern, buttoned-up looking Miss Partridge, who looks the part. And that's the thing, isn't it? The bad guy is usually not the person who looks like the bad guy in real life. But since these movies are made for children, it has to be translated in a way that's easy for children to understand. But Abigail Gregory was one of the first Disney switcheroos, person you think is the good guy and they're not. And her psychology, her obsession, and the sibling rivalry aspect is fascinating. And she is only redeemed by the goodness of her younger sister Sally. She doesn't do anything to deserve. Sorry, a little stutter problem there. I'm getting all worked up. She doesn't do anything to deserve the redemption she gets at the end of this movie. It is her sister who is the one that she's jealous of, because her sister did all of the work and had all of the talent for the fame and fortune, and her sister is also the one who does all of the work for the redemption and the one who suffers the whole curse. And so I kind of like it because the rich famous person isn't the bad guy for once in some of these movies, but I also kind of like that they did kind of pull the wool over our eyes in a time when most of the Disney villains we were getting were Scar and Hades, ones who are very obviously the villain. To have this kind of shadow villain, to me, was pretty exciting, and especially to have it be, a little girl and then a little old lady. Just it's the same character but 60 years apart, because those are two of the types, people types that you suspect least of being a villain. So Abigail Gregory is going to be my first Halloween season villain here at the Villains Lair, because she's just too much fun. So if you liked this video and you want to hear more, you want to follow up and see what next week's villain is in our Halloween series, don't forget to hit, I knocked stuff over, to hit like and subscribe under the video, ding that bell so you can get updates every time I add a new villain to our roster. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and if you want to hear more, don't hesitate to hop over to Patreon, SoundCloud, or Stitcher to hear my podcast every Friday as I'm doing a walking tour through the Disney parks to help you get to know the different attractions, how they suit different needs that your family or party might have. And this week we reviewed the Disney dining plans, so that can help you plan your trip to Walt Disney World. I'm looking forward to seeing you and hearing more from you in the future. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and have a wonderful weekend.